My name is Brother John Glasenapp. I am the director of the Institute for Sacred Music here at Saint Meinrad, and it is my great privilege and a true honor to be with you this evening for this performance by the Fisk Jubilee singers. This concert is offered in conjunction with the course Sacred Music and Race, taught through the Saint Meinrad Graduate Theology Program. That course, which begins right now, is led by Dr. Karen Shadle, a musicologist and specialist in American sacred music. We are also very blessed and grateful to be joined by the Most Reverend Shelton, Archbishop of Louisville, Kentucky, and former chairman of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Ad Hoc Committee Against Racism. We come to concerts for a number of reasons, most often to be entertained. And while tonight may be entertaining, the goal of this program of African American spirituals is much more ambitious, important, and timely. We are here to learn and to connect, and I hope all of us will feel by the end of tonight that the worlds we inhabited this morning got a little bigger, a little more interesting, more beautiful, and more inspiring. This music and its story, particularly as it has been passed down through the Fisk Jubilee singers, teach us about who we are as spiritual people, as people with a shared past, and as people striving for a better and more united future. The program this evening will begin with remarks by Dr. Karen Shadle, after which our performance by the Fisk Jubilee singers will begin. You have 3 QR codes on your program notes. The first will take you to this evening's music. The second directs you to the Institute for Sacred Music homepage. It is filled with upcoming events, resources, past videos, and at the very bottom, a sign-up form for our e-newsletter. I hope you will register. Finally, if you are interested in supporting this work and helping such free and open to the public programs continue here at Saint Meinrad, please consider donating on our donation page by selecting Institute for Sacred Music as the designee, or add your contribution to our baskets in the hallway. Thank you in advance. Following the concert, we will have a brief intermission. Concessions will be available in the hallway on a suggested donation basis. Be sure also to check out the information in the lobby on our other programs in the School of Theology. We will gather back in the theater at 8:15 for a discussion and Q&A that will open with remarks by Archbishop Shelton before we open the floor to questions and comments from the Archbishop, Dr. Wilson, the director of the Fisk Jubilee Singers, and Dr. Shadle. As we begin this evening, I kindly ask you to silence your phones. Now, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Karen Shadle, who has served as director of the Office of Worship for the Archdiocese of Louisville since 2016. She previously held positions in parish and campus ministry. A native of Louisville, Karen earned a bachelor's degree from Centre College and a master's degree and PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, with specializations in sacred music. In her role at the Archdiocese of Louisville, Karen is responsible for the ongoing liturgical formation of clergy and laity, offering classes on various topics related to liturgy and sacred music. She prepares archdiocesan liturgies, often serving as choir director or master of ceremonies. Karen also teaches occasionally in the Institute for Sacred Music at Saint Meinrad Seminary and School of Theology, and has recently been involved in national advisory committees for the Eucharistic Revival. Karen and her husband and 2 children are members of St. Raphael the Archangel Church in Louisville. It is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Shadle as our presenter this evening. Thank you.
Hello and welcome, and thank you so much for your presence here and for that warm Benedictine welcome. I really want to acknowledge the work that Brother John has done here. It is really exceptional for us to have here in humble Saint Meinrad, Indiana, the Fisk Jubilee Singers and this incredibly historically and musically important ensemble that you will hear much more about over the course of this evening. And then, of course, also Archbishop Shelton Fabre, my Archbishop, who will offer some of his reflections and perspectives as one of the Black American bishops in the United States. This is truly a star-studded evening, and I thank you and commend you for your presence and your willingness to be here, and especially to Brother John for pulling all of this together. So this is a pre-concert lecture, and if you've ever been to one of those, the purpose of a pre-concert lecture usually is that an expert is supposed to get up here and share with you all kinds of facts and background information and secret lore about the performers and the music that's about to happen, so that you, as the listener, can then unlock the true meaning of the music that you're about to hear. I'm not really going to do that, in part because that can be sometimes boring, in part because I know that Dr. Wilson will engage you with some of the history of the group, but more so because I want to do something even more basic, more primal, something that you don't need to be an expert in sacred music to do. And that is, I want to talk about how to listen to music. And you might say to me, Karen, I know how to listen to music. I put in my earbuds, I push play, that's it. That's how I listen to music. Incorrect. That is how sound waves hit your eardrum, okay? But what I'm talking about when I say how to listen to music is I mean something not mechanical, but something very human, something very artistic, very cultural, and very personal. How do you listen to music? And more specifically for us tonight, how do you listen to music that may not be your own? You're going to hear a lot of spirituals tonight. And so spirituals, this is a uniquely American genre of music that originated, as many of us know, with the slaves, mostly in the American South on plantations, mostly in the early to mid 19th century or thereabout. I'm going to state something obvious, but it's worth saying. None of us were there when this repertoire developed. And though some of us are probably connected through our ancestors to slavery, many of us are not at all, and none of us here tonight are engaging in chattel slavery. So, are the spirituals then meaningless to us? How do you listen to music that is not culturally yours? How do you find meaning in music that is about something which you have no specific connection to? When I was reading and studying some of the history of the Fisk Jubilee Singers in preparation for this visit, I was struck by one particular vignette, one little story about their first major tour, and this would have been in the year 1871. So Fisk University, a historically Black university, was initiated in the Reconstruction period in the United States after the emancipation of the slaves in order to deal with this new group of freed Black people who needed to be educated. And they needed money. And so the Fisk Jubilee Singers were formed as a fundraising effort. And so they were on their first major tour through the northeastern part of the United States. And they came to this Congregationalist church. And this church had a pastor, and his name was Henry Ward Beecher. And he suggested that the Fisk Jubilee Singers should start their concert behind a curtain, much like this one behind me. And then after they sang a few songs, that curtain would then rise and reveal them. This is a practice that was referred to as blind listening, blind listening. And you should know that in those days, the Fisk Jubilee Singers were doing something really kind of strange and odd, which is that they were uniting this The thing that white people were used to, the European concert hall tradition, which was very polished, very buttoned up, choral tradition, with the spirituals, which were largely unknown at this time, and very emotional, very expressive, agrarian, improvisatory. So they were introducing a real novelty to audiences, and no one was really quite sure how this would go. And so Beecher thought that his mostly white audience would be more receptive to this music if they heard the singing first, the beautiful sound, before seeing the people who were singing it, which were described as, quote, poorly clad, untutored, colored students, end quote. So he hoped that the drama of this reveal, such unexpected sounds coming from these bodies, he thought that that would encourage his congregation to open their pocketbooks a little bit wider. Now, I actually don't know if that worked out for him, but I want to suggest that blind listening is an incomplete and insufficient way of listening to this or to any type of music, really. Why not? Because you do not just listen with your ears. You listen with your eyes and indeed your whole body. One thing about singing that I think maps really nicely on top of our Catholic theology is its corporeal nature, right? It is of the body, the mystical body of Christ, the church, the true body of Christ, the Eucharist, which is broken and held and tasted and touched and eaten. Singing, too, is very much of the body, right? It is breathed in, it is blown out, it is resonated in our chest and our mouth, it is tuned in our throat, this instrument that is the only instrument that is divinely ordained, made by God, universal, everyone has one, free, it moves with you. You cannot separate song from the bodies that sing it. Bodies that are male or female, black or white, bodies that are a particular size and shape, bodies that have a distinct beauty, despite being broken down perhaps by age or illness or trauma or seminary. As Brother John mentioned, this is part of a graduate course on the topic of race and sacred music. And it may surprise you to know that there's almost nothing out there. I did the thing that every teacher does. I Googled to see had anyone else taught this course, and there's really not a lot out there. Why not? Well, I think it's because we often think of race as a visual phenomenon, right? I know you are white because you look white. I know you are black because you look black. But sound also structures our racial identities and the performance of those identities. So the provocative question that's going to be guiding our class is, what does race sound like? What does race sound like? How does sound inform our own performance of our identity? How does our identity then shape the way that we listen? As one example, when you saw me moments ago come up those stairs and approach this microphone, you were processing subconsciously a lot of visual data, the whiteness of my skin tone, my femaleness, my approximate age, which is younger than you think, my clothing, right? You were processing all of this, and you expected a certain sound to come out, maybe a certain timbre, a certain pitch range, a certain accent, that my sentences would be structured in a particular way. And then when I opened my mouth to speak, it either confirmed or perhaps challenged what you expected. And when sight and sound don't match, it is sometimes confusing, sometimes amusing, sometimes even offensive. Recording technology, as they developed over time, of course, made it easier to separate bodies and voices. You have probably had this experience, I know that I have, where I meet someone that I have only ever heard, like maybe a radio personality or someone I've only talked to on the phone. And then I see them and I think, that's not what I expected. That's not the person that I had painted in my head. That is blind listening. Older members of this audience might remember a very popular radio show called Amos and Andy. Two Black radio characters voiced by two white men who for decades, like 40 years, sounded Black by using what we might call a form of auditory blackface. Slang, dialects, accents, exaggerated poor grammar and diction. This too was blind listening. By the way, we have whole TV shows now that are devoted to this concept of blind listening. The Masked Singer, if you've ever seen that, or The Voice on NBC. Both of these shows play on the confusion about separating body and sound. Modern technology allows us to regularly consume music and sound that is separated from the bodies that create it. Consider for just a minute, as modern men and women sitting out there, how much recorded sound, that is sound filtered through digital technology, you consume in your average day. The digital alarm that wakes you up, news broadcasts, radio, downloaded music, audiobooks, podcasts that you might listen to on your commute or while you're working out at the gym, the Muzak that's piped in at the grocery store, voice and video calls, FaceTime and Zoom, voice assistants like Siri and Alexa, and the voice on your GPS in your car, notification dings on your phone, the beeps of medical devices, the white noise that you use to fall asleep. We are just constantly washed in recorded sound and recorded music. And as a sidebar, P.S., Catholics, what is perhaps the one exception to that in our daily life? It is the liturgy. And the fact that the church is such a stubborn holdout in this field, I think is absolutely right, because I think the church recognizes that this separation of body and voice is essentially dehumanizing. For listening to be authentic, for our sacraments to be authentic, and indeed in most cases valid, it has to be human to human. There's a reason why the church has basically forbidden the use of recorded music in the liturgy. It's because it lacks the, quote, lacks the authenticity. Those are the words of Sing to the Lord, the bishop's document. Lacks the authenticity of this assembly, of this body of people who have a unique voice on their own. He was talking about African American worship when Clarence Joseph Rivers, that is Father Clarence Joseph Rivers, said that African American worship has, quote, a natural tendency for interpenetration and interplay, creating a concert or orchestration in which the ear sees, the eye hears, and where one both smells and tastes color, wherein all the senses, unmuted, engage in every experience, end quote. Indeed, I could not agree more with Father Rivers here. The ear sees, the eye hears. A bit of synesthesia is a good thing. So tonight, I want to challenge you to listen with your ears and your eyes. And I will encourage you to go even further, as Father Rivers does, and to listen with your whole self, your whole body. Listening is an interpretive task, and it's very much conditioned by our history and culture, and that's our collective history and culture, and also our personal history and culture. You and I can hear the same words, the same melody, and get different meanings out of that because of who you are and who I am. This includes race, but of course a million other things about us as well, our gender, our age, what kind of family structure we came from, what region of the country we're from, so on and so forth. The philosophical term for this is your subject position. And I don't want to go into a bunch of philosophy here, but the subject has agency and is acted upon by an object. And so in our case, you are the subject, and the music we will hear tonight is the object. And so subject position means that we listen with this question in mind. Who am I, and what am I hearing? And that may be different from what your neighbor is hearing, or what the performers themselves are hearing, because we each have our own accumulated wisdom and culture and history, and parts of that we share with one another, and other parts of it we do not. This exercise of listening from your subject position is not meant to divide us, or for us to throw up our hands and say, well, everybody is unique and we have nothing in common. On the contrary, it is to show us this great richness of sacred music, which resonates differently for me and for you and for each of us. It moves some to tears. It moves others to deep meditation. For some of us, it might feel autobiographical. For some of us, it might make us want to get up and move our bodies. For others of us, it produces trance. And what I want to say is that all of these are good and appropriate ways to engage in and listen to music, even if it's not your own. As one example, one of the songs that you will hear tonight, I think, is called Steal Away. Now, you should know that slaves were often not allowed to keep heirlooms, trinkets, like material things, letters, these sorts of things to pass down. And so sound and song and story, which were much harder to regulate, were much better ways to hand knowledge down. And so these spirituals are characteristically brief and repetitive in their texts, using call and response, using repeated lines to make them easy to remember, easy to carry with you, easy to pass down from one generation to the next. And Steal Away is characteristic of that kind of structure. So you'll hear the phrase steal away 3 times with growing intensity each time. And the way this song does it is with a higher pitch at each repetition. Steal away, steal away, steal away. And then if you're wondering, where do I steal away to? Then it answers that question. To Jesus. Steal away home. We ain't got long to stay here. Now, what could that music mean to various subject positions? How might this music resonate for me or for you? Steal away. What could that have meant to a slave on the run? What could that mean to someone who has to hide their true identity? Or to a priest who's overrun by administrative burdens? Steal away to Jesus. What could that mean to someone discerning their vocation? Steal away home. What could that mean to someone who is homeless, or someone who is very far from their homeland, or someone seeking asylum? We ain't got long to stay here. What could that mean to someone who's sick and dying? What could that mean to us as Catholics as we are currently encountering and engaging with the mortality of the Holy Father? What could that mean for a seminarian in his last semester? These are just a few examples of potential meaning in just one simple refrain of music. Now, if you thought to yourself at the beginning of this evening, why is this white girl going to be up here talking to us about Black music? And surely you had that thought at some point. This is precisely why, because I will be listening as me. I actually don't have any other choice, right? This music resonates in me as it will in you. It is, in fact, all of ours in this moment. In this hearing, it belongs to this body and to our bodies. Because suffering is not a Black experience, it is a human one. Longing is not a Black experience, it is a human one. Joy, sorrow, hope, jubilation, these are not Black emotions. Of course, they are human ones. Music is not a universal language, as the platitude says. It is a language for sure, but it speaks specifically to each of us. It is something we bring our very selves into. This is an art form in a very human sense. So to return to this idea of what does the music mean, no matter how much knowledge and background I give you, I cannot answer that question for you because the meaning is not fixed, it's fluid. It's a partnership between the music and the people who hear it. It's going to be a dance between the music, the notes, the words, the rhythms, and the people who hear it. Your stories, my stories, the stories of the performers, the stories of those who have passed it down generation to generation. That was true 150 years ago when the Fisk Jubilee singers were formed, and it's true for us today. You can think of sacred music as sort of collapsing a timeline, bringing the past experiences and the emotions around it into the present context for us. I think it's very scriptural in this sense, right? We think of the Word of God, being unchanging, but it's ever fresh, ever new each time we rehear that. The same here. In this concert that follows, I would encourage you to listen in the way I have described here, with ears and eyes, with your whole body, your whole self, with empathy for the bodies that are creating the music. Allow the music to resonate literally and figuratively in you. Listen with your own identity and your own subject position in mind. If you practice this kind of openness to the sound, I promise you that the music will bless you with all sorts of new meanings. What we are about to do is, in a very real sense, liturgical, because we will do this work of listening together. This particular gathering of God's children is not going to be repeated. The way the music is going to resonate here, it will not resonate the same in the next place. So let's let this hearing be part of that ongoing dialogue between performers and listeners, between past and present, those who created it many years ago, those who passed it on, those who perform it tonight, and our ears that may be hearing it tonight for the first time. I know that we need to pause here and allow the singers to get set up and allow some more folks to come into the room, but I just want to conclude to say that I know that you will come to love this repertoire as much as I do, and I hope that you will enjoy and listen well tonight to the Fisk Jubilee singers. Thank you.